Well, hello, friends. Let's have a quick conversation. This is going to be a quick video this week because life is a little crazy right now. A little crazy stuff going on at work. Anyways, a little bit of housekeeping. If you look up there, you see that I have kind of cleaned up my set a little bit, and there's a lot of white space that I would really like to add. So if you've got some dank step back memes that you can send me to print off and put on my wall here, I will do that thing. Anyways, the story today is a pretty quick one, interesting stuff. I am on the record saying that I am a really big fan of the new Congresswoman-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York's 14th District. And she was officially elected last week, and within a week of her being elected has already done some pretty badass stuff. The first thing that I have to mention is that she did a Instagram live where she cooked mac and cheese, talked to her audience, and basically did Q&As about politics, which I think might be one of the coolest signs that we have a millennial politician who is in the public eye. But on top of that, the bigger thing that she did was yesterday, she and a bunch of environmental activists and groups like the Justice Democrats did a protest in front of Nancy Pelosi's office, who, you know, Nancy Pelosi is most likely to be the next Speaker of the House. And in that protest, against her own party, demanding a special committee on climate change and what's called a Green New Deal. And I want to talk about the Green New Deal and what the idea is and where it's getting its inspiration from, because I got questions like from patron 255AD who asked me last night during Step Back Tonight that capitalism is not going away on a soon enough time scale that you can use it as a necessary step towards dealing with anthropogenic climate change. So that means that we have to find a way to deal with climate change while there's still a capitalist economy, which, you know, capitalism is not exactly the best at dealing with environmental issues or with doing something that might slow growth. Mostly because capitalism is inherently an unstable and self-defeating system, but that's a video for another time. And yes, this is a response also to the fact that the IPCC announced recently that we have about 12 years to get on top of this carbon thing before we're going to start doing some very serious damage to the planet very fast. And a Green New Deal seems like something could be interesting. The economy kind of sucks right now for people who make less than $50,000 a year. And so it would be great to have something that solves both problems. The fact that we're dying due to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that nobody has meaningful employment. So what's the Green New Deal? Well, it is an attempt to use the resources of the state in order to create a series of programs in order to invest in the critical infrastructure that would be needed to get past a petroleum-based economy, a la the New Deal of the 1930s. The New Deal of the 1930s was passed in the United States by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who I begrudgingly would say is my favorite president. And with the crisis of the 1930s, a lot of banks were functionally out of money. There was a massive ecological collapse in the Midwest, especially like in places like Missouri and Kansas, called the Dust Bowl, and unemployment in the United States was at an unprecedented high. It was an economic catastrophe never seen before or since, although 2008 came close. And basically the idea behind the New Deal is to spend a lot of government money, but use it in order to invest in critical things that, you know, the United States needed. They invested in infrastructure, libraries, and all sorts of public works. And in order to do that, they used the coffers to hire lots and lots and lots of young people who were out of work in order to get them salaries, benefits, and things that they would need to, you know, take care of them and their family, which they could then turn around and use to put into the US economy and sort of get things moving again. This is in response to the Republican idea, which was austerity, which is this sort of backwards idea about how government debt works, in thinking that if we just starve ourselves, somehow we will be able to be healthy again. So The Republicans tried that for the first few years of the Depression and made it even worse. The programs of the New Deal worked out fairly well, and then we had the biggest public works project in world history, the Second World War. And a lot of people would say that the industrial expansion in the Second World War for a lot of countries was their ticket out of the Depression. But yeah, it all comes down to the idea of debt, which is something that the right tends to use as a sort of scare word to say why you shouldn't help anybody and why we shouldn't do anything that is even remotely close to fixing the economy or doing anything for people who make less than, I'm going to go with like $1 million a year. The goddamn lizards, man. Unfortunately, their concept of debt is trying to use the fact that most people don't know that there's a difference between personal debt, you know, credit cards and lines of credit and stuff, and a country's debt. A country is usually indebted primarily to its own people, i.e. people who own bonds and some foreign investors. In the United States, even today, by far, the largest holders of American debt are American people who are in the bond market. And if you believe people like Alexander Hamilton, there is an idea that actually debt can be good for a country. Because if you have a large market of bondholders, that is basically a bunch of the wealthy elite of a country investing in the economic future of your country. And if you think about government debt in the terms of foreign governments owning your debt, it's sort of their investment in your economic future as well. Because people don't give debt to people who they don't think will be able to pay it back. Now, debt can get overwhelming if you get to a point where the interest payments of your debt get to a certain percentage of your overall income. It can sort of cause a negative spiral, in which case, you know, a country can go bankrupt. But let's just say the United States, while it is in a preposterous amount of debt, is nowhere close to this problem. On top of that, the US could get itself out of debt pretty quickly with a few prime cuts and a few social programs that would cover a lot of the major costs. Mostly this means ending the $1 trillion plus military budget, you know, that whole global empire thing that the US does. On top of that, a public healthcare service would actually put the US into a net positive as far as its budget goes instantly. Yeah, public healthcare service would actually save the United States a lot of money and would get them out of debt in a few years. So it's not that the money's not there, it's just that the US budget is terrible. So anyways, what would a Green New Deal do? Well, we need a lot of new infrastructure around the world in order to deal with the issues of climate change. We have an entire energy grid, an entire transportation system, an entire world that is entirely focused on running on petroleum, which is the exact thing we need to stop using. So that means we need to get rid of hundreds of millions of cars. We need to find an entirely new energy grid. We need to replace a lot of the ways we produce electricity with entirely new forms of electricity in 12 years. It is a thing that the market, which is a highly inefficient way to redistribute resources, is not up to the task of doing. You also have a lot of people, especially young people, like me, who might be underemployed or unemployed. I'm currently bouncing between 3 jobs, so yeah, life's crazy. But I also know I'm very far from the standard story. There are lots of millennials out there who really could use a single, steady, paying job. And a job that makes things better, like improving the environment, would be a job a lot of millennials would take up. So the idea would be to invest in things like, say, building massive amounts of solar panels in order to replace all of the coal power plants, investing in carbon sequestration projects, which would be when you take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and bury it underground, reforesting a lot of the world that has been destroyed, investing in science to try and get things like, say, cheaper and more efficient solar panels, LIFTR, the thorium nuclear power, or even developing the idea of the lab-grown meat in order to at least try and ramp down the meat industry. Ideally, we'd get rid of it altogether. So, you know, if we could brew our meat in breweries, that would definitely go a long way towards solving our climate crisis. So, you know, there's things for the people who like to grow, the people who like to build, and the people who like to do science. So, like, that's a lot of work. But the thing is that the capitalist market, which is entirely dependent on petroleum, has no interest in changing. And capitalism, because it fetishizes money, not the betterment of the world, would rather see the entire planet die rather than even see a slowdown in the speed of the increase of profits. Keep in mind that an economy that's not growing every year is considered a failure. That's something we really need to work on. This all comes from a 2007 article by Thomas Friedman and picked up in 2008 by a special committee. And on top of that, it has been the official party platform for the Green Party and presidential candidate Jill Stein. And even in countries where there isn't the money to do it, we could have a Green Marshall Plan, which was after World War II when Europe was basically destroyed. In order to prevent communism, the United States invested a lot of money in Western Europe in order to rebuild their infrastructure. I would imagine that the goal of stopping human extinction and entire planetary collapse is a loftier goal than stopping communism. So, I don't know, seems like a pretty safe investment. And now it's on the plate of the Democrats, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez amongst many other activists who went to go visit Nancy Pelosi. It was an inspiring thing to see. The fact that a Green New Deal might actually be on the plate of the incoming Democratic House at least has some form of optimism. Nancy Pelosi, the neoliberal right-wing person she is, actually did express some support for this. I'm sure she's going to try to co-opt it and try to make it as watered down as possible, but we're at least getting somewhere. And it makes me very happy to see that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, is not going to be a wheeler and dealer and give up on everything that got her elected the second she gets elected. I'm pretty excited to see what she's like in Congress. She's already knocking it out of the park and she hasn't even started yet. And this fills me with this strange feeling in my chest. Is this what hope feels like? That can't possibly be true. Step back with hope? Jeez.